It's weird. Everything's backwards.
This is not a show and might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and Guest.
Judah and Guest, this is not a show. We're going to look for a connection in the discussion tonight. I am pleased to be to be able to talk to Mike Cedres tonight. Michael Cedres. Does anybody call you Mike?
Yeah, that's fine. Either's
Yeah,
fine. I'm not
some
too
people-
particular.
Some people don't like it. I mean, I know I typically just call you like, hey, you, but
Yeah, usually around family, I'm Michael, and my father-in-law is Mike.
Interesting.
So we have the same name. So, but I'm not too particular.
Well, how are you doing tonight, man? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just know we've had some good conversations in the past, and I thought I'd just bring you on, kind of get your sense. You have a kind of a unique perspective I appreciate on things going on in the world, and it's kind of a weird time.
Yeah, it's been a busy week.
Oh yeah?
Well, I mean, politically and socially, everything's happening.
I'm not really tuned in as I should be. So what do you mean? Like, what comes to mind when you say like a lot has been happening this week? It's been busy.
Well, we had the Republican convention.
Oh yeah,
night 4 tonight. So,
is this the final night tonight?
Yeah, we're stealing viewers. Trump is furious, like usual, but
I don't know. What do you mean he's furious?
Oh, I don't know that someone would do what we're doing and steal his viewers at his time slot. And,
I think his time slot's at 10:30, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean 9:30 your time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he'll be safe then. We won't decimate his fan base. I know there's a lot of overlap here between this show and everyone watching.
I think so, but what's interesting about this day and age is, I know there are a lot of people that watch things live, but I don't know many of them. As far as live TV, do you know a lot of people that? I mean, I think you watch live. You have live TV, right?
Yeah. I mean, sports, but we use the antenna for that, and that's about it. I mean, cable is so expensive. I mean, we've never had cable, but we have most of the major streaming channels.
I mean,
but
you can get pretty much everything you need on just like replay on YouTube, basically, right?
Yeah, and the people that have cable that I know, most of them end up watching like HDTV or like reality shows on cable, and it's like every time I go to a hotel or something and there's cable, I'm flipping through and I'm like, there's nothing on, and the commercial breaks are so long.
So when I was moving some of our stuff into my right after we got married, so into Chanda's house, I dropped the TV and it broke off a piece and didn't work, and that's the last time we ever had a TV.
So we've had 3 TVs since we've been married. I guess 4. Technically, we have 2 TVs right now, but we've never paid for a TV because people are always buying new TVs and don't need their TV. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I think eventually we're going to buy one, but
I don't know, man. Like so I said that to say my kids grew up without TV. They grew up YouTube kids. My daughter was like swiping on the iPhone when she was 1. And finding her own YouTube videos, dangerous bikes, but probably not good. Screen babies. But she, I remember the first time we visited, my parents have a TV. So, I mean, we do have, although it's not connected to TV, we still just connect it to like Hulu and what have you.
Yeah.
Netflix. But the first time they saw commercials really frustrated them. Oh, we already got some comments. They're like, what is going on? What can you, Mom? Can you fast forward this? It's like, can we
Yeah,
skip
yeah,
this?
same thing. Or watching sports, or it's just like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah. Well,
yeah. I remember people getting excited for the summer because summer was reruns of the shows. So it's like, oh yeah, I missed an episode during the
yeah.
season, so I get to watch like
Get
whatever
to
happened.
catch that one I missed.
I got to miss that episode of Law and Order. That's the one that's really the one that cracks me up. There's so like SVU's been on for like 2.5 decades or something. So maybe not that long, but a really long time.
Yeah.
And there's so many episodes, 3 or 4 different Law and Orders, and like there are people like I'll work in their house or something, and they just watch TV all day. Usually older people,
Yeah.
retired, and they'll just sit and watch Law and Order all day. And it's just like,
I love Law and Order, but I mean, if you miss one, I don't think it messes anything. They're all kind of like formulaic.
yeah, it's the same.
It's nothing. There's nothing ongoing narrative. Tori Norquist is in here with us. Thank you, Tori, for joining us. Tori, what do you say about the RNC? RNC is on the TV, not a show on the phone. He's got them both. He's got them both going right now. Nice. Now, Tori is a lot like you. I'd say he's very skeptical of both sides.
Yeah, libertarian leaning.
Yeah. Now, recently, your wife put on Facebook that you and her are libertarian.
Yeah, I actually shared a post from Scott McKnight because, and I never share things on Facebook. Like, as a rule, I try not to comment on articles and things, but just posted. He wrote an article or blog post, whatever you want to call it, about mask wearing, and he just sort of attributed libertarianism as the reason why people weren't wearing masks, and then proceeded to use no data or anything to correlate his argument with reality. And I was just like, this is a total misrepresentation. And he was like, Italy's done a great job. And I was like, Italy's been decimated by this virus. Like, they've been destroyed. And I actually went back and forth with him in the comments under his article, and he asked me, and he's like, well, what would you say to people in Europe? And I was like, I don't know, like 1776. I don't come here. We're clearly not doing well. Don't come here if you don't want to get sick. That's what I would say. I think. I mean,
I don't know. Like, I don't know if we're doing worse than anybody in Europe.
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean,
I mean that's the thing. I'm not saying we're doing better or worse. Yeah, like you said, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was just like, I mean, it wasn't even really about libertarianism or anything. It's just like, let's represent what we're saying accurately, and not okay, we're going to give blame to this one group of people. And it's like, well, I mean, there are a lot of voices right now, and
it's complicated, right?
We're in the middle of something that's essentially, the hurricanes hit, but okay, so those towns are underwater now, those places, and it's nobody's fault, and we're getting hit by something that's nobody's fault. And
and it does seem to be. It seems to be there seems to be an attempt to attribute the virus to the right and to liberty-loving people. Like, the reason we are suffering is because of liberty-loving people.
Yeah. It's interesting. In Illinois, we have, the city of Chicago has a list of states that have to quarantine when they come to Chicago. So, it's a whole list, and South Dakota's on that list now. But Wisconsin was on it, and then they recently were removed. And I guess because they have a mask mandate now, once they got the mask mandate, they were removed from the quarantine list.
Well,
Which it seems like I don't really know the details or if I'm representing that correctly, but it just seems, it's kind of just weird everywhere.
well, I recently I had a short couple. I just had to go in really quick to Illinois and grab my car, and my buddy who I was going to stay with one night, because he lives really close to my job, because I was going to go into my job. I didn't want to miss any day of pay, so I wanted to get in. I flew all night. Actually, I flew into Fort Lauderdale, which is like a hot spot, right?
Yeah.
For COVID, and slept on a bench for a couple hours, and then flew up to Chicago. Got there around like 9, went right to work, dropped my stuff off, whatever. And my buddy was like, "Hey, you might not want to fly into Chicago because there's a big quarantine problem, or like you're on the list coming from North Carolina and definitely coming from Fort Lauderdale." And I said, "My license, first of all, says Westmont. So if they like, hey, where are you going?"
Yeah,
I'd be like, "I'm going home," or I'd do it without. I'd fib. I wouldn't lie, but the thing is I get off the plane ready, to like do whatever. Nothing. Nobody asked me where I'm going. Nobody even approached me. Nothing. Like, what does this mandate mean if you do nothing? Like, what is a mandate that you do nothing about? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't. It seems like a lot of it is on the honor system or suggestion. I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't had a reason to go into the city, so I haven't, and pretty much just been staying home for this whole quarantine, aside from going to work. But haven't gone anywhere. We looked at going on vacation for a couple days in September, trying to do a little family trip, and we have a 1-year-old, so that makes it difficult.
Yeah.
But just going places, just the thought of going somewhere, it's like, well, okay, we could go somewhere, but then like it's an indoor water park. Is that even going to be open? And like you're going to have to wear masks everywhere inside, and it's just like a lot to work through just to go somewhere for a couple days. It's like, I think we decided on just doing a staycation and take a couple days off of work, and we'll go spend the money we would have spent on vacation and do all the things around here and do that instead. But it's a little bit. It's a little challenging to think about. Like, okay, we're gonna go somewhere, but then like, all right, like we could go to a beach. Then the bathrooms are probably gonna be closed.
Yeah. Well, now there are states that are more open than others. You might be able to. But let's get back to this idea of let's talk about libertarianism and Christianity. All right.
Yeah.
Because this is something that was brought up in your comment section. I want to see if I can find the actual quote, but it was something about, I don't know, somebody brought something up and sort of said you can't be political and Christian at the same time. And it was I was trying to find the meme before we started, and I was talking to you about it. It's like a meme that said, oh, I know who posted it, but it's something like, Christians, you don't worship a flag. Your goal isn't to blah, blah, blah. Your goal isn't to be a conservative, whatever. Now, I think we probably have differences when it comes to that, but I want to ask you a question. What do you see the difference between somebody who cares a lot about their job, cares a lot about certain perspectives that have to do with their jobs? To say, like, for me, like, I really prefer that websites be made out of, you made with JavaScript. Some people hate it, but I have a certain philosophy that, like, and I can sit there for hours and explain why it's important, and I'm passionate about it. Actually, I'm not, but let's say I am. Okay.
Yeah.
And because there are certain things like Marvel or certain, shows that we get passionate about, and yet nobody ever says, well, Judah, if it doesn't really matter if it's PHP, JavaScript, or Ruby on Rails. You need to you got to choose that or Christianity, and Christianity is more important. You know what I mean? But when it comes to
Yeah.
politics, so what do you think about that?
Yeah. So when I think about the political, one of the things that shaped me was actually taking a class in political theology, which I hadn't experienced a lot of or read a lot of books on political theology. But one of the things you learn about the political is that it encompasses everything in life, that everything is the political, and it's the way that society is ordered. And then in our minds, we think, well, we're voting Democrat, Republican, we want to be involved civically, but it's about how like all of society is ordered. And so when we think about the political, uh, it's how everything is ordered. So you're always in the political, and people want to be apolitical or pacifist, or say you can't be a Christian and political. Well, that's a political statement, because how you order
Thank
your
you.
life, the way you order your life, is political. And people talk about worldview. And it's really similar to worldview. I'm not big on worldview myself because I think it sort of segments things and puts ideas into boxes that aren't necessarily helpful. Like they're helpful categories to understand things intellectually, but they don't always play out in life. When you think about the world and the political
Yeah.
and interacting, and I know for myself when I was, much younger, reading like worldview, I'm just like, all right, I have to characterize this person. Like this person's a nihilist, so he's probably suicidal right now. Like he just wants to kill himself, and or listen to
Sounds
Nine Inch
exhausting.
Nails. Right, it is, and it's just like, but then like you read the Bible, and there's not like I don't see Jesus categorizing people that way. Just sort of like the earth is the Lord's and the fullness and all of it. So how I approach politics is like everything is the political, whether we're talking about how the country is run, but then when you look at the schools and the police, even down to like streets, maintenance, highways, parks,
Yeah.
recreation, like basketball rec league, like that's part of the political.
Yeah.
And so like our engagement in life, and it's just come to the forefront now when we think about mass and virus, and we realize that we're in that now, and it's obvious that we're in that now. And I think the mask is almost like the physical manifestation of like the invisible structure that we've been living in, and we don't always think about or recognize, because it's just we go to work, we come home.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And I wonder if we're living in a time that makes so. What do you think? Because this just came to my mind when you're talking about that. With what you just said in mind, living everything is a politico. Do you think that sort of these prescient issues have really brought it to like made it more tangible? But do you think that also everybody being on social media, everybody being in constant contact with each other and being in contact with political people, everybody sort of being one, within touching distance, but not actual touching, but with, being able to communicate to each other. Do you think that that's created sort of a pseudo politico?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, everyone's a political pundit.
Yeah.
Which is exhausting, and it's why I probably won't ever post something like I posted again. Like there were, I may someday, but there were like almost 60 comments. Like I stopped reading. Honestly, I haven't read all the comments on that. Like I stopped reading them. Like, there were people that said something like, "Oh, I'm going to get attacked for this." And like, I don't want you to be attacked. Like, I'm over the vitriol too.
Yeah.
But absolutely. But the thing with social media is that tech companies are their own countries. Like they
Mhm.
are. They
Like a
function.
domain, right? I mean, it is.
They function as international governments, not national like nations. They function internationally.
Mhm.
And if you watch the podcast like a year ago with Tim Pool and Jack Dorsey and his forget the name of his lawyer, his legal counsel, but they were all on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about the ins and outs of Twitter and people being canceled, banned, doxxed, and they're talking about like the U.S. law, and they're like, well, we're not really following that. We're following like UN guidelines, like international guidelines. They're not following U.S. guidelines, and it's sort of like, you know,
Mm.
like we go back and forth. Like this is a private company; they should be able to do whatever they want to, like ban whoever they want. But then also you have the president on there, and he's an important person, and it's a political tool now for campaigns, and sort of the ethics of interfering with that and tampering with that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of blurred lines.
Yeah, and it's and then from the government and oversight perspective, when you see a clip of like a congressman talking to anyone from one of those companies, it's clear they don't understand what's going on, and they're also trying to regulate it, and it's just not it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And even if you put a regulation on something, they're gonna outsmart it and outthink it and be two steps ahead of it.
Well, do you think so? So both you and I come from a tradition where a lot of people from a circle where a lot of people talk about being apolitical, right?
Yeah.
Do you think? So I have an assertion here. I believe that causes people to be more political because, as you
Uh-huh.
say, everything is political, and we're in a politically saturated environment, and we're in this pseudo political, like super concentrated, pseudo political infrastructure called social media. So when somebody says we don't believe in being political, it sort of creates it to me it creates a petri dish for people to really whichever way they lean to really grow in that direction when everybody is not political.
Yeah, and I think what I've seen is it's not grounded in anything. I think there's when people think that way, it's usually grounded in sort of like a nationless philosophy
Mm-hmm.
of politics, that we're not part of a nation, or we don't sort of like recognize the nation. That's not like we're not living for this country. We don't like that's not our main goal. And so we
Right.
don't identify first as a citizen of a country, but then it's not grounded in any in a theology.
Right.
And what I see biblically is there is a theology of nation in how God deals with people and dealing with individuals within their nation, and also dealing with nations collectively.
Say more about that. What do you mean? Like as far
Yeah,
as it applies to us?
yeah. So I could take like an issue like social justice, and we want justice, and so the way we really want to achieve justice is to have the government step in and do something. Like I think even apolitical people are really looking to whether it's defund or regulate, whatever it may be. And so you're looking you're looking to the outside source, or government, whoever it may be, to do something. And that's what the protests are about. And I've seen, a lot of apolitical people join in protests demanding government action. And so, thinking about this podcast and what we're going to talk about, I was kind of looking into Israel. And it's interesting, in Deuteronomy 17, before Israel has kings, they're given regulations for how to set up a kingdom. And what God says, what Moses tells them is, they're going to, it's not going to be the best thing for you. Like, when you decide that you want a king, it's not going to be the best thing for you. And they're going to tax you, and you're going to be their servants, and you're going to have to do hard labor for them. But that's before, they're still in the desert. They haven't gone into the promised land. They haven't done anything. They haven't taken down Joshua. Or they haven't followed Joshua and taken down Jericho.
Yeah.
And so that's anticipating the desire of human nature to want a king, to want to be ruled, because there's a sort of comfort in being ruled.
Yeah.
And so they're given guidelines for setting it up. Like, they've got the playbook already. So when, you get to Saul, they set up the king. They already have the plan in place to set up the kingdom.
Yeah.
And they do that. And so, Saul, you have David, Solomon. So by king number 4, the country splits. You have the divided kingdom. And Rehoboam becomes king, Solomon's son. He's in exile. He comes back, and they say, your father, was a hard king. We worked for him. They built Solomon's temple and his palaces. He enlisted 30,000 men to work for him. So, what does he do? He says, okay, your father worked you this hard. Well, like, my little finger is the size of his thigh. Like, he beat you with whips. I'm going to beat you with scorpions.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you look at the kings after that, and it's a disaster after disaster after disaster. And this is sort of like the pattern I see. Like, even apolitical people don't like the idea of talking about, like, freedom, individualism, capitalism, because there's the comfort in the government or being ruled.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, whether it's acknowledged or not, and I see, like, you take any issue, roads, like, all right, we'll do that. Well, there's more regulations on roads, and then in Illinois, like, the tolls just keep increasing, and they're not going to decrease. Mm-hmm. And it's just like there's always a pattern of increased, like, you're going to serve them. Like, if you look to someone else, like, outside to govern and rule you and solve the problem, then they're going to rule you. Like, that's
but even when they got into the promised land, right, there was a period of time where the judges were the structure, we'll say, right?
Yeah.
And it was with the judges that they got fed up. And from what I've seen, it is because there were infringing, there were other countries that were, harassing, maybe, raping, maybe, there was racism, there was oppression going on, and the judges couldn't do anything about that, right? Because they couldn't assemble an army. That's what a king does. A judge could only disseminate the, what they knew to be, God's law, but between the Israelites. And so the townspeople were tired of oppression. They were tired of systematic oppression by outside governments.
Yeah. And I think, what the people miss too is they're sort of given, like, the law and the civic code, like, how to live and how to treat each other. And for society to flourish. And they didn't follow that, and that's why they got invaded.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't because they were weak and the judges were weak. And it's sort of like, okay, well, like there's a certain time you have to look at your behavior. It's like, is this like is this caused by something I'm doing? Like I always think about like Jordan Peterson, like put
Yeah.
yourself together. And for some
Yeah.
reason, like that message now, if you say that, is like,
It's anathema. People
yeah,
will
it's
reject you.
yeah, they'll call you like alt right or a Nazi, and it's just like taking personal responsibility for your actions is like the foundation of just human growth. I think. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
just
that's go ahead.
I just like the NBA like had a mini strike yesterday. They didn't play their games, and so there are a couple of teams were going to leave the bubble and not finish the playoffs. And then the owners told them 25 to 30% pay cut if there's no playoffs, and they're immediately back playing.
Yeah. And when China, a super oppressive, when China, it looked like they would take away any kind of benefit from the NBA. Oh man, they were let's appease China.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. When somebody says you can't be libertarian and Christian, I think I don't believe you can be apolitical. One, like you've been saying, everything's politics. Two, so I follow, and I think I'm sort of like quasi, acquaintance friends with Mark Van Steenwyk. Do you know who he is?
No.
Okay, well he's a community leader organizer up in Minnesota, and he is probably the purest form of non-Christian, non-political I've ever seen, but he is an anarchist.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, because that's what non-political is, right? It's anarchy. I mean, isn't that the very apolitical? Yeah, I mean, isn't that the very definition of what anarchy is? It is the rejection of political norms and standards, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I think there's people that just don't engage with politics and might say they're apolitical. I think anarchy, I mean, it's more of a system of free association. And so I look at church, the churches, like Tolstoy wrote about Christian anarchy. But he came at it from a position of love, that if we just keep loving each other, we'll love each other so much we don't need a government. That love will overcome everything. And if we keep loving, like love is the ultimate anarchy, because you don't need a
I don't
government.
disagree. Yeah.
Like you'll come together and you'll sacrifice for each other. Now, there are libertarians like Ayn Rand who people think of. I mean, I personally like a lot of things that she says in her books. She's anti-Christian, but she is all about doing everything for the individual. Everything is for the individual. You do this for yourself. And then if you do this for yourself, the world will be a better place because you'll be a better person, or you might be flourishing financially, and that might help other people, but you're still doing it all for yourself, and everything is self-motivated.
Yeah.
But that's one school of thought, and I think there's ways to think libertarian in ways that are unchristian, and I probably would say libertarian because I'm more outside of the scope of either party, and I couldn't, like, with good conscience vote for either person and say I support their agenda and their platform, because I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I just personally believe that flourishing comes from individual freedom and liberty.
Yeah.
And uh, and And I sort of see that, in the early church, in the New Testament church, they were not trying to get power, trying to be part of the political system. I mean, they were outcasts. And, in the history of this country, there's been movements for like America to be God's promised land, the new Israel, like Ronald Reagan, City on a Shining Hill. Like it's saying like the U.S. is the new Israel to bring God's blessing into the world. And sort of that thinking is, that's scary to me.
Say more about that. Why?
Well, it's sort of attributing just a place to a country that it does not have, just in the overall scheme. Theologically, biblically, the U.S. is just a country.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of elevating it. And so if we do something, it's God's will, like God wants this to happen. So,
yeah,
it's used as a justification for certain things, even wars and, oppression. I remember like around 9/11, everyone was so religious. Then it was like everything was just anti-Islam. And I'm not a Muslim, but it's just like, but I also remember like there was sort of some phobia around it. And, even in my mind, like if I saw someone with a head covering, well, there is that like, well, like we're right because we're God's country. And so what we're doing because we're God's country.
Yeah.
And like the rest of the, it's like the rest of the world is.
I think people definitely take things too far on both sides,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I appreciate you. You have a very skeptical approach to both sides, all sides, right? Like it's just, let's look at it. Let's be skeptical. It's good to be skeptical.
Yeah, and it's just so bizarre, when you look at the platforms that people are running on, like this time around, it's like, okay, like people are really worried about systemic oppression, and I think, like people do get profiled because of their skin color. Like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But also like the person who's been perpetuating that system is running for president, and his vice president is the prosecutor who's put people in jail for nonviolent crimes, like a lot of people. And so and then but it's not like the other team, and the other team is so bad, and it's like it's you're voting for the system. Like you hate the system, but if you vote for that, like you're voting for the system, and it's so plain and obvious, and it's just it's really strange.
That's what I wanted to get to, because there was a comment, from a mutual friend that we both love very much, or a good friend, and they said that there's a place to rebuke people for putting liberty over love for a fellow man. And that really it gave me a moment of like, what? Because it tends to put love into this real this abstraction, this abstraction of feeling, whereas because to me, I love liberty because I love other people. Like I don't love liberty because I get to hang out in my underwear in my house. I love liberty, in the political sense, because liberty helps people keeps people from being oppressed.
Well, and that's like exactly what Martin Luther. That's exactly what Martin Luther said when he was protesting in the Civil Rights March. Like, not that like the documents are racist, but we need to live up to the standard of the documents. Like we need to cash the check for us. Like, you need to cash the check for us. Like the ideals are so high, we're not living up to them,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be. And all men are created equal, and so we need to treat everyone like they're created equal. So cash the check. Don't withhold. And I think,
What do
you
you mean
know
by cash a check? Like, I don't know if I
so
fully.
the civil rights movement, you know um, I'm not really qualified to talk about this, but I think he's talking about just the inequality in society, and that uh, people were treated as less than because of their skin color.
Yeah.
And that's not all men are created equal. That's not
Yeah.
inalienable. That's not inalienable rights.
Right.
It's No, that is systemic oppression. And I think, you know, there has been progress and things have been worked through, and there's still a lot more progress to be made. And I
I,
think,
but see, I think there's a difficult. I want to come back to this idea of the cash a check, but I wanted to. How does this play into it? Because I feel like there is a disconnect when people say, and I've seen the meme, and memes, at this point are obnoxious. There is something to be said about we want to defund the police. We see the police as a problem. We want to defund the police. But yet we want to continue we want to continue, social justice programs that
mhm.
necessitate enforcement, that necessitate the police, but we want to defund the police. Like, there seems to be a disconnect there. I think that people, because of Facebook and social media, have this real, and including me, probably more than anyone, I have this sort of truncated, superficial idea of what is really going on. And like you said, politics goes way deeper, in the sense that an economy is much more than a rich dude making money. There's all kinds of people involved in it. Politics is way more than Donald Trump. It's all kinds of things involved with it.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem of, like, just take like economics is something that I see lacking in almost every discussion. And that's what usually will bring someone to like a liberty position. At least for me, I think it's probably mainly economic. That uh you know is Jesus or Paul? I think it was Paul talking about uh, ministers being paid to
Mm-hmm.
preach.
Worthy
And
of
it's
the
like,
work. Yeah.
yeah, don't muzzle the ox while he's treading out the grain.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, that was Jesus. Yeah.
and but he's talking about, like, okay, so like that wasn't exactly talking about what Jesus quoted it as. So, you know, further the application to now, someone's working, and okay, oh, how much goes to taxes? And it's just like, well, if I'm working and you're taking this much from me, then you're muzzling, I'm the ox working. And so the grain is my compensation for my work.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're muzzling me. And
Mm-hmm.
then you de-incentivize people. And so you see, we had a friend over who got laid off for work, and he was getting the unemployment that everyone was getting and making more money than they get at their job. And he's like here for another month and leaving, moving, and he's like, I'm not going back to work because I'm getting more money being unemployed. And it's just like, well, all right, like there's incentive, there's motivation. It's like,
Yeah. It's
and
hard though. Yeah, when
but
that's
the Christian,
offered you, if somebody says I'm going to give you $800 a week, I'm just
but
going
the,
to give
but
it
then
to
the
you
Christian, but then the
if you don't
Christian
work.
side is, but if you stop there, it's not Christian. It's just like, okay, you took away, uh, or you gave more incentive to work, and I have more money. But that's not Christian. That's just an economic position. What's
Yeah.
Christian is James, where he says, look at the rich people. They're the ones that mistreat you. You know, you want to give them the seat. You want to give them the best seat at the table, but they're the ones that mistreat you. Uh, and you know, you pray and you ask for these things. You fight in your court. You don't get them because you want to spend them on your own desires.
Yeah.
And so, uh, you know, if it's just an unhinged, like I want as much as I want, well, that's not Christian. That's not a Christian thought process. I think even some of, you know, there's like Christian financial programs and financial freedom and those kinds of things. But
Yeah, Dave
ultimately,
Ramsey.
but
That's
then ultimately, it's just helping people retire better. It's like I think it's Dave Ramsey who says like live like no one now, so you can live like no one later. But it's just like so you're saving now, so you can like maximize your fun when you retire. And I'm just like, I okay, like that doesn't mean people aren't going to do more good with more money, and there's not a lot of wisdom in saving, doing all that. But also, like, if you're like teaching people like you need to save so you can retire well,
Yeah.
otherwise you're responsible, and teaching that as like a Christian doctrine, that is a problem.
Well, I don't know. It may be a problem. What is a problem to me is people that talk about radicalism.
Yeah.
And then go home and have, you know, huge 401k, you know, and spend thousands of dollars on a deck. Like that's not radicalism, you know, that's fake. I think if I want to be radical, I have to stop the David Ramsey type mentality.
Yeah,
And
and
think
I'm not saying, you know, I'm using that as an example for me of, you know, how it could be detrimental. It doesn't mean, you know, if all you take out of it is libertarian or that thought process or saving money, is that great? I'm going to have a lot of fun. Like if you go to James, it's like, well, ultimately, you're not supposed to be living that way.
right.
Uh,
Well, but it's hard to define fun, right? I mean,
well, yeah, and I'm also not saying you should tell people how to spend their money, but
why not? I mean, who does tell people how to spend their money? Who should in our society tell people how to spend their money?
I mean, I think you should choose how you spend your money.
But we have a lot of people that don't know how to spend their money. So should we have? I mean, should the church be? I mean, I don't know the answer. I'm just spitballing here. Kind of because last night I talked to, I don't know if you saw any of it, but I talked to Josh about, you know, about church polity and the importance of the throughway of having church be the universal, like the thing that's always been church, you know, and they're people that tell you how to live. The church is people that tell you how to live. They have a set, you know, they derive it from the Bible. They say what they've said for centuries, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
To me, that's refreshing to hear. I don't know if I completely agree with him. I'm working on it. There's something God's doing in it. But then what I don't like is a church that doesn't tell you what to do at all.
Yeah. I think, you know, right, and I think it's sort of like a discipleship issue too, where you're as a disciple, as a follower of Jesus, how are you going to live into that with your finances?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'd say for myself, for most of my life, well, probably even now, like I've had the easy way out because I haven't had much money, so it's not like I have to decide what to do with it. It's been pay bills and maybe save a little bit, but not really, and that's it. Like I, you know, I'm speaking from like I've had the easy way out. Like having money is so much more responsibility and accountability than just getting by paycheck to paycheck. Uh, but I think, like on the issue of who tells you how to spend money, like with church, like I think church can be, but I think you can, but if that's a group that you choose to associate with, that's free association. That's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's different. And if you choose to group yourself with someone and say, I align myself with this organization because I agree with their principles and values, and I'm going to live according to those principles and values. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, people join cults all the time and give away all their money, and but that's a consequence of their actions.
Yeah.
But I also think about going back to love. I also think about like taxes. Like if we collect taxes to help the poor, it's like that's not love. There's no love in that at all.
Thank you.
That's coercion. And if you don't do that, you're going to jail. So that's not love. But if I have the choice, I'm going to save my money and save up for whatever, save up for retirement, or I give some of it. I don't have to. I have the choice to do what I want with my money. No one's telling me, and I choose to do it. That's where it's love.
Yeah.
I could be doing it out of guilt. I could be doing it out of coercion. Emotionally, I might have heard a sermon or watched a video that tugged at my heartstrings, but ultimately, no one is making me do it. No one's going to put me in jail if I don't do it. And that's where it's love.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Jesus is he also said, pay your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But like he sent the disciples fishing to get their taxes. That was doing he sent them to work. He didn't hand them the money. They had to go to work and catch the fish. Like that was their trade. And there were times when he blessed them, other times where they got like caught, they were fishing all night. And then they just got like this massive haul, and the boat was starting to sink because they had so much fish. But they were at work, and then he blessed their work as they were doing it. And I think, like that's another thing that we don't think about. That like I think about that with
that's good.
Like I think about that with my business. As a small business owner, like I started. I guess it's been 3 years now.
Wow. Congratulations, dude. That's awesome.
I've been painting for myself, and like the jobs I was taking in the beginning compared to the jobs I'm doing now, like there's been like I had this prayer in the beginning that was like, God, just keep me from anything that's not good for me. Like I don't want to take a job that's too big for me or would be too much for me to handle. And like, made it like a prayer. And make my work a prayer as part of my prayer life. Like every time I take a job, I pray for it and pray about it, or try to make that a practice. And that God has blessed it. I'm like, I'm so busy now, even when a lot of people aren't, and I'm so grateful for every single job that I have, and I'd love to make more money so I could give people money. And I think, it's kind of been amazing. And, like the jobs I'm doing this year, it's like ramped up to a whole nother level of work. Like I think about 3 years ago, I'd be so intimidated to take on anything, not anything, but some of the things I've done this year and some of the projects. And it's sort of been amazing. And it's almost like, casting the nets out and God answering. And I think, God also wants us to get out there and cast the net. And sometimes we just, that's another issue. And sometimes people feel guilty for being out there and casting the net too. And like, no, you're both full of fish. God gave you those. Like, if you're not being deceitful or dishonest in business, you're doing your job with integrity and quality, and your boat is sinking because you have too many fish, like thank God, and then like start distributing fish. Like,
Yeah. Now the key though, there is something about the we've Tori says, "Amen." It's something you were saying earlier, and about I think about your business, and um, my brother brought this up earlier a couple of days ago. We were talking, and he was saying one thing we have to remember though, that boat full of fish was not abundant riches for Peter. That was his ticket out of the business.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, because it was like that was what kept him from going to jail. And so he got the boat full of fish and then gave up everything to follow Jesus.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think about that too. You know, I went to school and got a pastoral degree and degree for ministry, and didn't feel it was the right time to go into that. And like, I get asked why I'm not sometimes, like my customers, or they'll find out I studied to be a minister. Why aren't you doing that now?
Yeah.
So, you know, it just didn't feel it was the right time with my family and other reasons. But it's just like there could be a time that, you know, get called out of it
Yeah.
to put it down
Yeah.
and do a different kind of work. So
Well, and to that point, Peter was not being faithful with his work. Well, at least according to I was thinking about I love the show The Chosen, you know? Have you seen The
no,
Chosen?
no, I
Oh,
haven't seen it
yeah,
yet.
The Chosen. They paint so they do really good characterizations of the apostles. I love them. My dad hates them, but I love them. My family, we've watched it like 3 times. I still cry. Like at the point where the boat. I won't spoil it for you, but I think you know what happens. But it shows how, or at least it says how scalawaggy Peter was before that point. Like he had really got himself over his skis to that point, you know, and like he was going to jail if he didn't get a boat full of fish. And they really culminated well to that point, you know, where his brother's like, he joins them, and you got to watch it. It's great. I love it. Yeah, you might hate it. I don't know. So, but to your point, if you're faithful in your labor, you know,
Yeah.
the labor is worthy of his work. And I think the comment you made at the beginning, it really hit me when you said, you know, talking about the Politico and how our whole life, you know, to segment out the idea of politics, you know, as a not even as an abstraction, but as like this construct that we don't have to deal with, I think is nonsense. And I really hadn't heard it as articulate as how you said it. That even, you know, when we used public, what would you say, like the basketball team,
Yeah, like public, you know, like, you know, you do something with Parks and
Parks
Recreation,
and
or
Rec?
like
Yeah.
you go and you use like the playground. That's
Mhm.
You drive on the streets.
Yeah, it's
You,
politics.
yeah,
You didn't build that.
no.
Oh, sorry.
Actually,
um,
I did work for the park district for a few
I
summers,
know.
so
um, so to kind of wrap things up, we're out of time, but I think it is important to come back to the idea that Christianity is not a subset. Christianity is not a construct, and I don't believe. I think it's it's a way of life, and I don't believe that politics, you know, being a libertarian, Democrat, um, Green Party, what have you, is a construct. I don't think it necessarily is a construct as much as a perspective on how you said something. How did you say it about how to live life or something like that? What did you say earlier?
Yeah, well, like, even like how to be a libertarian and a Christian. It's like I look at it as like it's a philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and if I say I want to take the stuff and I want the stuff to be mine, then that's not Christian. But the Christian is like love and like sacrifice and live out of Jesus's love, and theologically, like Jesus's love means he's eternally giving of himself for us, and like that's what you want to live into, and not. But no one's telling you to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and it's a good discussion. Maybe we can continue. There's some other topics you wanted to talk about, right? There's some other things you're talking about. I forget. We were talking about something. You're like, we got to talk about that at some point. I forget.
Oh yeah, I just it's just so much going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't really hit
just in the world, you
Yeah.
can't. It's hard to hit everything. I mean, you could take one of those and talk for weeks.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. We don't have weeks. I actually have to prepare for class tomorrow, so you got to learn a little Latin.
Oh, Excelsior!
Hey. Oh, I should use that. I think my students would appreciate that. A lot of them, at least. Yeah.
I think I studied Latin. I studied Latin for a couple of years and remember none of it. Yeah.
Oh man, it's hard to remember something you don't use often.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thank you, Tori, for commenting and coming on. I actually posted I posted that Christianity Today, Scott McKnight, Americans and their non-masking on the YouTube channel. So if you go to Not a Show, it's there it'll be on the video. But hey, what was the name of your business?
Telos Painting.
Telos Painting. If you are in the Westmont or in the northern suburbs of Chicagoland area, TELOS, right?
Yep.
What does telos mean?
So it's Greek. 3 semesters of Greek, and so I got a business name out of it.
Nice. The telos
just means like last, end, final. Like sometimes it means like final judgment, but I'm like, you come in and you're like the last person on the job and the final.
I love
like,
it.
Cleaning up after everybody, but you're the one that like makes everything look good. And it's like, once it's painted, it's done and it's final. And it's just like, you helped people achieve their dream and their goal. And, they're happy that the project is done.
I love that. As somebody who I work on, marketing and stuff like that, I think that's brilliant. Do you have a logo? We have to talk about that.
Yeah, I do. Oh. Yeah, it's just a T, and it looks like it was painted.
Nice. Simple. Simplicity is good. All right. Well, I will. We'll be back on here at some point, and next week we'll have other people on. Hopefully, you'll come on next Thursday. Maybe.
Yeah.
All right.
I might be able to do that. We'll see.
All right. We'll see. We'll take it week by week.
Yeah.
I mean, if any of us if the internet's still up by next week, right? Because who knows what's going on. But all right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. This is